We are back. Yeah. Yes. All right. So we're going to cover the end of Kapila's discussion with his mother, Devahuti. Um, Here it goes. So I'll backtrack slightly just to the one paragraph that we covered at the end of yesterday's session. So Kapila has just finished describing paths that lead up, like improve your experience of existence, and paths that lead down or make your experience of existence more problematic. And basically, the paths down are those in which you try to enjoy at the expense of others, and the paths up are where you try to enjoy in concert with others. So the enjoyment of others is equally important to your own enjoyment, the happiness, the pleasure of others. Those both lead to temporary situations because you're both trying to, in both cases, you're trying to achieve temporary things, which is external enjoyment. Then Kapila described a third path, which is where one acts for the happiness of others, not for the sake of personal enjoyment, for the sake of purifying oneself from selfishness. That path could lead you to enlightenment, but it's difficult. It takes a long time. You have to go through so many stations, and you have to work really hard at getting rid of selfishness by the strength of your purity or determination. And so the most common destination there is to wind up merged into Vishnu when the universe dissolves, but still have your separatist vision of yourself, and therefore come back into the world when it reassembles. And then again, after a very long time, wind up in the human condition again. So at this point, after describing those three paths, Devahuti brings up this question. She says, no matter which path I follow, I seem to always come back to the human world. If I am wicked and selfish, I go through hell, and then a series of birth in lower species, and then again I become a human. If I'm moral, then I go to the heavens, and I enjoy with the gods, before I again become a human. Even if I am dedicated to selflessness and philosophy, I go to the unmanifest quantum, but eventually wind up again as a human. There are so many roads, but they all lead right back to the place where they start. So then, Kapila says, therefore you should adore with all your heart the Supreme Being. That's the other path that I haven't explained to you. I've explained to you the way of acting selfish. I've explained to you the way of acting unselfishly. I've explained to you the way of acting to get rid of selfishness, but I haven't explained to you the way of acting out of love and the results of that. So he says, therefore you should adore with all your heart the Supreme Being by devotion that is fervently attached to his attractive qualities. Become like a bee delighting in the lotus of his feet. So Devahuti says that path won't loop back to its beginning like all the others. No, Kapila explained. The path of Bhakti Yoga, aiming at pure love for the all-attractive son of Vasudeva, rapidly produces accurate knowledge and powerful disinterest in material things, taking you beyond the unmanifest quantum and into the direct association of Brahman. So unlike the path of trying to remove selfishness, the path of love automatically removes selfishness very thoroughly, very quickly, relatively thoroughly, very thoroughly and relatively easily and quickly. So it's much easier to achieve something beyond what the Jnani could achieve by doing this unselfish practice. Devahuti became eager to hear more. So here's where we start the new stuff. Kapila explains, devotion to Krishna generates disinterest in material things, causing our heart to become neutral towards all attempts to enjoy external objects. So it's just a simple principle. That's how love acts. Love has a quality to it, I believe the sages have described it as the third quality out of 9, I think. One of love's qualities is to fixate. It fixates the lover on the beloved. So what happens is you tend to ignore or not even notice things which are outside of the scope of the beloved when you're in love. Plenty of love songs talk about this. It's common knowledge. Nobody else in the world but you, right? So that's the basic concept. So what happens is when you get love for Bhagavan, then all the internal root of your being, then all of the external things you lose focus on them automatically. Devotion to Krishna generates disinterest in material things, causing our heart to become neutral to all attempts to enjoy external objects. No longer do we see one thing as dear and another thing as repulsive. So by bhakti, you get the result of jnana more easily than you get it from jnana. Jnana means knowledge, philosophy, discernment, intelligence. That can lead you to have the same experience where you're not inclined or disinclined to anything, but it takes a lot of work. Whereas with bhakti, it happens easily. We become neutral and objective, but because our heart is not clouded by a mind full of preferences and aversions. Clear, objective vision allows the heart to perceive itself by itself, bringing one to self-realization. So what bhakti does is it removes the distorting preferences and aversions from the mind. And then when the mind is cleared, that's the basic principle of yoga, is that once the mind is cleared, the self can be perceived. So now Devahuti asks, when the bhakti yogi realizes Brahman, well, what does he perceive? Brahman is the supreme substance. It's consciousness itself. So this is the basic objective of all the yogas, all the spiritual practices, is to experience Brahman, the supreme substance, the supreme thing to experience, the Gyayam, Uttamam, supreme experience. So she wants to know, when a bhakta experiences the supreme experience, what is it like? Spiritual says, if you love Bhagavan, then can't you become selfish by serving our family less and not doing social services because all you care about is God? Nope, you don't. You have a separatist concept of God if that's it. There's bhakti. Remember, Kapila explained 4 types of bhakti. Not all bhakti is pure and real. Some bhakti is motivated and influenced by ignorance. When bhakti is mixed up with ignorance, then you have the sense. Remember how heavy Kapila was explaining the person who worships God but doesn't worship people, doesn't worship God. God is, it's not bhakti at all. God doesn't even want it. God doesn't like it. So that would be bhakti mixed with some ignorance, in which you would see your family or your society, etc., as non-God. Remember, this is the basis of all realization, is going to be absolute unity. So she's asking now, when a bhakta realizes Brahman, what do they perceive? Now, Kapila explains something very interesting. He says, this is very, very fundamental to the Bhagavatam's concept of realization. It's in the Bhagavatam, one of the thesis statements in the Bhagavatam, which is Vedanti tattva vidas tattvam yad jnanam advayam prameti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdyate. Yet that concept that the supreme reality is experienced in different ways by different people, Kapila is now going to explain. He says, the singular, all attractive, is perceived in different ways. Wow, it's very windy today. If I knew that, I would have shut the windows. The singular, all attractive, is perceived in different ways. She asked, what does the bhakta perceive when they perceive the ultimate reality? And now he says, they perceive different things. Different bhaktas will perceive different things. It's one thing that they're perceiving, but they'll perceive it in different ways. the singular all-attractive is perceived in different ways by people with different natures and different angles of vision. So this is why there's different versions of what the Supreme Reality is, because the Supreme Reality is perceived differently by different people. Some will experience him directly as Bhagavan. Others will see him as Paramatma, and others will experience him as Param Brahman. Paramatma is the supreme soul or the supreme consciousness that controls everything, or is the root of everything. And Param Brahman is the substance of reality itself, the nature of consciousness itself, the experiencer, but not a specific experiencer. Experiencer-ness. So there's these three basic categories of ways of experiencing Brahman. One is just as experience itself. One is as the supreme experiencer. That's Paramatma. And the final one, the most full one, is the supreme enjoyer, because the purpose of experience is pleasure. We experience things to enjoy. And Bhagavan is the enjoyer of experience. So those are three possible ways that the Bhakta can realize the supreme truth. I'll come to the questions later, because I find that most of the questions are not exactly on topic. So after we get through the topic, I'll come back to the questions. Now Devahuti asks, Devahuti's questions are always on topic. Do any of them return to this world? Like previously the Gyanis, or what are they actually called? Nishkam Karma Yogis, or the Jnana Yogis. The guys who are doing that third path that Kapila explained, where they are working for the sake of purifying themselves of selfishness. They're working for this to benefit other people, and the only thing they want from it is purification. Most of them wound up returning back to human life and dealing with the same nonsense again. So now she wants to know if the Bhakta who experiences Brahman will also come back to the human form. Kapila says, nope. All of them become completely detached from all connection to this external world. Then she asks, how do they see the external world then, that they once were so attracted to? Now, if they're completely detached from it, how do they see it? How do they interact with it? So this talks to spiritual's question. This speaks to spiritual's question earlier. They see one spiritual substance, he explained. Brahman, consciousness itself without any specificity. It only seems to have so many shapes and forms, so many colors and sounds, because their senses were so eager to experience such things. What do they see in the external world? They see the same thing they see in Brahman, in Bhagavan. They see it's the same thing, it's the same substance, it's Brahman. There is no such thing as the material world. The material world is perceived as such by our mistake, by our illusion of thinking that it's disconnected from Bhagavan, that it has nothing to do with Bhagavan, that it's ours. That's what makes it seem like the material world. When you don't have that misconception, you don't experience the material world. It doesn't exist for you in your realm of experience. What you experience is Brahman. You experience consciousness taking all these shapes and colors and forms and everything because of the people wanting to enjoy those particular shapes and colors and forms. So let me read that one more time again. She says, how do they see the external world after they've realized Brahman? She says, Kapila answers, they see Brahman, that one spiritual substance, consciousness itself, that seems to have many shapes and forms and colors and sounds because the experiencers of it were eager to experience those things. This desire, their desire, stimulates Brahman to become the totality, which is the Mahatattva, and then develop doership, ahankara, and then cause the three potencies of the totality to produce all the elements, senses, and objects which form the body and the entire world. So you already know that stuff from several weeks ago, where we discussed, or many times in the Bhagavatam, where we discussed evolution of the universal elements, how the universal elements develop from the three modes, coming from interacting with the ahankara or doership, which comes from mahatattva, which comes, etc., etc. So what he's saying is, how do they experience the external world? They see it as a transformation of Brahman. So they're not experiencing something other than Bhagavan. They're still experiencing Brahman. So they're not seeing, oh, this thing has nothing to do with God. That thing has nothing to do with God. They see everything. Famous situation that I really like. This was from the founder of the ISKCON movement. In the early days of that effort, in this late 60s, he said, somebody said something like, can an alcoholic or a drunk become Krishna conscious? And he said, of course. Krishna is the taste in the wine that he loves. Well, that's all he has to realize. The wine, everything is Brahman. He just has to become more conscious of it. There's very interesting things. The way that a realized bhakta sees the world is totally different than the way that an ordinary person sees the world. The ordinary person sees unrelated objects. The realized bhakta sees everything related to Brahman and Bhagavan. All this can be directly realized, Kapila continued, by those whose eagerness to attain divine love makes them disinterested in external things and fixes their ambition upon steadily practicing bhakti yoga. The trick is, when you're interested in exploiting the external things, you see them all as different things, and you have preferences and aversions to certain ones. When you cease that motivation and you seek the root of all the things, which is the consciousness itself, which is who and what you are, then you see the things as they truly are. All right. That is the, let me see what questions you have now, because from here we're going to go into a closing section. Are avatars sent to us to facilitate the love to the Supreme because it's easier for most humans to love and get attached to a human form than, say, nature or concept? Yes. But that's correct. But don't forget that the form is not an illusion. Brahman manifests forms, colors, etc. in response to the desire of the experiencer. That's just the way it is. That's not an illusion. The illusion is to think this form, this name, this color, this shape has no relationship to the fundamental Brahman that's producing it. Thank you, Abhishek. So don't think that the ultimate reality is, you could think that the ultimate reality is a formless thing and you could realize it as such and you can be happy like that. But to more fully realize the ultimate reality, it has form, it has color, it has shape, it has nature, it has particularity. That part's not fake. The avatar comes to show what it's like. Thank you, spiritual. Can you love Bhagavan and still have preferences? Depends on how fully you realize Bhagavan. They describe this as low grade, medium grade, and high grade, or Kanishta, Madhyama, and Uttama Bhakta. If you really have the high grade or the full or the true love, you won't have external preferences because everything is delightful and everything is directly related to Bhagavan. But if you have middling realization of bhakti, you'll still have preferences in relation to the bhakti. Natalie, yes. Govind, thank you. Johnny, how does bhakti perceive the presence of evil in others and human history? It's the result of the basic evil, which is ignorance of the self. It's ignorance of the self which produces disharmonious action, which produces disharmonious results. And that ignorance of the self is specifically the separatist concept of a self. See the self as fundamentally separated from other selves and the Supreme Self. It's the root of all evil. Greedy Rick, is there a difference between disinterest in material things and apathy? Yes, apathy means you have no interest in anything. The Bhakti produces disinterest in thing A by producing extreme interest in thing B. Natalie? No, not right now. Maybe one day we'll do a music thing. In other words, Krishna, Buddha, or Jesus were exactly what we collectively desired at some point in Boo realm history, just to clarify. Not really. Not really. More like what you need. Okay. Let's go to the next section. Oh, let me see my schedule for today. Got a little bit more time, but not infinite. All right. Conversation closes. So now the conversation between Devahuti and Kapila, which we've done in 21 parts, 21 sessions. We've been covering this for about a month. It's going to come to a close. So it's very interesting how Kapila closes it. He tells his mother, "You are my guru. I've spoken this just to serve you. Those who understand this knowledge will gain direct association with Brahman and completely comprehend the reality of matter and spirit. The pursuit of knowledge and the pursuit of devotion fixed purely on me only seem to be two different things," exactly what Krishna says in Gita. "They have one goal known by the term Bhagavan, the all-attractive." Okay? The goal of Jnana Yoga and the goal of Bhakti Yoga is the same goal, Bhagavan. So they're not actually different things. Even a material object reveals different qualities when it's appreciated from different angles. Yeah, if you look at the glasses this way, they look different than if you look at them this way. This way you might get a shine of something. What to speak of the supreme object? Of course, there's different ways of experiencing it, and it will reveal different facets of itself. To some it appears as Brahman, to some as Paramatma, to some as Bhagavan. Even a material object reveals different qualities when appreciated from different angles. Similarly, the singular all-attractive is seen in many different ways, in many different shastras. Many different sacred texts describe the supreme reality in slightly different ways because it depends on how you look at it. Thank you, Davana. Similarly, the singular all-attractive is seen in many different ways in many different shastras. There are so many ways to strive towards him. Ritual, sacrifice, charity, austerity, study, debate, self-control, renunciation of actions, or dedication of actions. Those are the primary paths. There are so many yogas striving to link with him. Bhakti Yoga is most certainly chief, but there are so many others promoting detachment or responsible attachment to the material world. There's so many ways to realize the Supreme. There's so many paths to achieve realization of the Supreme. There are so many realizations of him. First, one realizes the spiritual nature of one's own self, and then, becoming firmly disinterested in external things, a self-realized person can realize the all-attractive as either formless spirit or in his fully qualified form. My dear mother, I've explained Bhakti Yoga in its pure form and also mixed with the three material ambitions. I've explained how the invisible workings of time chase living beings, and I've explained the many different situations living beings get into as a result of acting in ignorance without understanding our true self-interest. Anil wants to know if somebody goes to Vaikuntha, do they remember their past? When you wake up, do you remember your dream? So it's something like that. Mother and son looked at each other, knowing the conversation was complete. Devahuti felt a strange sadness. All of her questions had been answered, but she wished her son would continue speaking forever. Kapila requested his mother to teach others what she had learned from him. So Kapila now says, I need you to teach what I taught you to other people. So you're my guru, now you become other people's guru. But, he says, never bother trying to teach it to those who are brutal, impertinent, arrogant, or uncooperative. And certainly do not bother with those who are hypocritically self-righteous. Don't try to teach it to those who are greedy, except greedy Rick, or those whose thoughts have not yet woken up from their dreams of accumulating objects. Nor to those who have no interest in devotion to me, and certainly never to those who are repulsed by my devotees. So this is just a different concept. In this day and age, we just try to put out a YouTube video and get as many people to come and watch it as possible. But in the old days, it actually took effort to teach each individual person that you teach. So don't waste your time teaching people that are just going to waste your time. Teach it to those who are sincerely interested in developing devotion towards me, who are respectful and never hateful to any living being, always willing to be friendly and helpful to all. Teach it to those who have become disinterested in external things and therefore have developed a peaceful state of mind. Teach it to those who are clean at heart, without envy, and who consider me dearer than the dearest thing. Mother, whoever hears this knowledge even once, with a little faith, will quickly find his heart given to me, and will certainly attain the place my feet reside. So that's the end of chapter 22. So I guess, so then there's one more chapter left. So there's still a bit more of conversation. And then you're going to hear what happens to Devahuti afterwards, and what happens to Kapila afterwards. We're reading the Bhagavatam, written by Vyas. Michelle says, at the highest level, you will stop reincarnating without having a body. How can you experience anything? Maybe that's not the highest level. Who told you that that's the highest level? I keep telling you that consciousness inherently produces the tools of experience and the objects to experience. But you guys keep insisting that the tools of experience and the objects of experience are part of the external world. And I keep telling you that external world means the ignorance of divorce from Bhagavan, the ignorance of separatism from Bhagavan. What will be gone is the ignorance, not the tools and the forms, if you do it right. When you are done with karma, then you will continue to be exactly what you are now, which is a conscious entity wanting to experience things, and therefore manifesting yourself through the tools of experience to experience the objects and things that you want to experience. The only difference is you won't be doing that through the lens of ignorance. So yes, of course you'll have a body, but it won't be a body produced by karma. It'll be a body produced by you directly. All right. There's one more great chapter. This next chapter is going to be great. Thank you very much. So come back tomorrow. We'll finish up this chapter by Friday, and then we'll be finished with the third part of Bhagavatam. And then you'll move on to the fourth part, which I haven't even published yet. So what we'll probably do is do a final edit while reading it. So you might hear me typing and fixing a couple of typos and things while we're going. All right, my dear sadhus. See you tomorrow.